There we are. On that note, I just popped a few guidelines into the chat for you to give you a sense as to what our evening will consist of. We are here to discuss my upcoming retreat at Hollyhock. And of course, I know some of you here are already registered, others are perhaps considering attending. And of course, this is a topic that concerns all of us. And so some of you, I'm sure, are here simply to be a part of the conversation, and you're very welcome in any and all cases. And so what I'd love to do is just take a little time to introduce you to the topic of psychopomp, and most especially to why I'm offering this retreat. This is a topic that I usually teach inside of my long-term trainings, but I've been, I would say, both inspired and guided by the helping spirits to begin to emphasize these teachings more to the public, and for there to be more offerings available to people who are not currently enrolled in one of my long-term trainings, specifically related to psychopomp. So I'd love to share a little more with you about why I think that is the case and why this retreat has come into being. As I was reflecting upon what to share and what would feel most beneficial for you to know, I was reminded of a journey that I did with my helping spirits when we were talking about the necessary and unnecessary aspects of suffering when it comes to the dying process. And of course, there are a great many efforts being made within a variety of contexts, within hospitals and hospices and end of life care facilities and in communities and so forth to alleviate the suffering of those in the dying process, whether that is occurring abruptly or gradually. And yet I feel that when it comes to the suffering that people in the dying process experience for spiritual reasons, I feel there's more we could do. I feel there's more that could be done and more that we could offer those in the dying process to assuage their concerns that are of a spiritual nature, and hopefully to eliminate in the fullness of time the suffering that people are experiencing that is due to what they're facing spiritually. And I think oftentimes what underlies the suffering is that there isn't enough of a conversation occurring about the spiritual dimension of the dying process. And that, yes, we are facing the end of the physical life of the person and the end of this human incarnation, but there's also the continuation at the soul level or on a spiritual level that I don't think is often discussed or understood as well as I feel that it could be. And I mean that across cultures and across religions and across cosmologies. And so what I have become very inspired to do is to bring my knowledge from my training in shamanism to this aspect of service, the care of those in the dying process, in the hopes that I can contribute to the conversation specifically pertaining to the spiritual dimension of what is occurring, how to prepare for death from a spiritual perspective, and thus to alleviate any suffering that people are experiencing because they don't feel prepared in that way. And perhaps there just hasn't been an emphasis or an understanding or the language or the framework or the context or a cosmology in order to allow for a natural process of preparation. And so the retreat is designed for anyone interested in this topic. And of course, part of what's so fascinating about how we relate to death in the West, and if I may, I'll make a broad, generalized statement, which is that I think we often treat death as though it's a possibility, not a certainty. And I see that even in instances where there has been a fatal diagnosis, that there can still be a way in which death is held as a possibility, not a certainty. And of course, herein lies the lighthearted joke that people make about human incarnation, that nobody gets out of this alive. And yet, why are we not turning directly towards death fully, with all of our beingness, including relating to it as a spiritual passage and a very, very sacred one? How can we become more well prepared for that process? And so, in considering that, this retreat came into being, and it is intended for anyone and everyone because nobody escapes death. And whether death comes early or late in one's life, whether death comes without warning or with a great deal of warning, whether it's your own death that you're concerned with, or the deaths of your loved ones or clients or patients, these teachings and practices are universally applicable because there literally isn't anyone who isn't going to die. And so then it just becomes a question of us deciding individually and collectively as a community, well, how do we want to relate to that certainty? How do we want to prepare for that for ourselves, our loved ones, within our families, within our communities? And what I'm very inspired by is supporting people within their own communities in becoming skilled and sensitive and prepared and engaged with the practices that I can offer in partnership with the helping spirits that will help you, whether you're preparing for your own death or supporting those in the dying process, all of the above, that will help you feel well equipped instead of, as I think many people feel, woefully inadequately equipped from a spiritual perspective, which is again what I feel is the underlying cause for why there is that category of suffering or anxiety that people face in death. And of course, my aspiration, which I'm sure is shared by all of you, is for us to alleviate every possible aspect of suffering that occurs with death. We know that some of it cannot be alleviated. We know that each death is mysterious and sacred and unpredictable fundamentally. We know that death can be linear at times and extraordinarily non-linear at other times. And so even when there are other types of suffering present, if someone is in excruciating pain, for example, or their death comes at a time that feels very untimely to them or to their loved ones, in this retreat, what we're focusing on is, can we at least alleviate any suffering that may be the result of spiritual concerns? And does that then potentially help reframe the other concerns that may be present and the other ways that there may be discomfort, pain, and or suffering? So in other words, does having a spiritual approach actually help alleviate every other kind of suffering as well, potentially? And so the retreat will explore how we can support those in the dying process within different contexts and in different ways, bearing in mind that you all are called to serve differently at the bedside. Some of you are professionals serving in that capacity. Others of you continue to find yourself called upon to lend your support in a more informal way, and yet in a way that does seem to be happening again and again, which is I know why some of you are here. And so whether it's for the animals in your community or the elders in your community or anyone in your community or workplace or church, anyone, anywhere, what we'll be exploring is the basic premise that cross-culturally there are helping spirits recognized as having this area of specialization They are the conductors of souls, the soul guides, the conveyors of souls, these different turns of phrase that are used, I would say, interchangeably and euphemistically in order to describe this particular function that a helping spirit can play, but also that a human can play. There can be a helping spirit who specializes in being a psychopomp, just as there can be a person who has that specialization or that calling. And the partnership between them is what we're going to be cultivating, that we all have helping spirits. Some of them are psychopomp allies. Some of them are specifically there with us to serve that function, to support us during our dying process and or at the time of death, and that these are helping spirits that can be known, that can be identified, that we can begin to form relationships with long before we're going to actually need their help. Of course, for those who live a long life, the reality is no one gets to know how short or long our lives will be. And so, wouldn't it be prudent for us to begin treating death as a certainty, not a possibility, and to begin cultivating relationships with these psychopomp allies whose presence creates such a sense of comfort and reassurance? And so, if every one of us has these same helping spirits, if every one of us has psychopomp allies, so does everyone else. And so there will at once be a focus on helping you either remember or deepen your relationships with your own psychopomp allies or discover them. You may have even more than you think you do if you already know who some of them are. These may be familial or ancestrals. These may be the same helping spirits who helped your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents and your great great grandparents and your great 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 grandparents. These may be long standing alliances that exist between your lineages and the spirit world. So they may have cultural specificity, they may have religious specificity. These may be helping spirits that you have had alliances with in other lifetimes. Times of devotion or worship in other lifetimes when you connected with certain gods or goddesses or deities within various, again, historical, cultural, religious, and spiritual contexts. There are just so many possibilities. And so there is often a sense of renewing or reprising these relationships. And sometimes the relationships are not only to support you and your loved ones, but allyships that have to do with you carrying the signature of the psychopomp, which might also be familial. It might also be ancestral in nature. This might be an area of giftedness that you come by way of your ancestry. And so there may be alliances with helping spirits that have partnered with your ancestors who themselves were psychopomps, just as you are. And so these may be helping spirits that have partnered with your ancestors in the service of others in the dying process. Because oftentimes what I find is that people who discover that they're psychopomps find out that they actually come from a line of psychopomps. And it's simply a question of receiving the training that's needed in order to remember, in order to remember those gifts and that inheritance. And so these can be relationships that are pre-existing, that have been either in the service of your immediate loved ones and ancestors and in the service of the communities that they were a part of, that they served. So there is a lot of potential beauty and complexity here. Oh, and I'm just noticing there's a little bit of an echo. I think there might be one or two people who are unmuted. Forgive me for a moment. I'm just going to go through and mute one or two people. I think that will help. Just a moment. Bear with me, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I know sometimes people join and then have to step away for one reason or another. Okay, there, that's going to be a little better, I think. So, as I was saying, there can be a lot of complexity, a lot of beauty, a lot of depth, and it is always my intention to at once try to present these principles and teachings in what I hope is a relatively clear and straightforward manner, while also allowing for all of the beautiful richness and depth that we will experience together and that we will discover together. And so the focus will not only be on you discovering who those psychopomp allies are for you, but also what the nature of the relationships is, because these may be allies, I suspect this will be true in many cases, who are coming to partner with you because you're called to serve those in the dying process, and that they come to support that partnership. And whether that's formal or informal, as far as I'm concerned, it does matter in some ways and for certain reasons. And when it comes to this practice, again, I welcome you, whether you play a formal or informal role at the bedside, because you can be so incredibly effective either way, even if it's a neighbor that you're helping. You can be so incredibly effective at assuaging their concerns. And so, what we'll be exploring is how do we help those who are dying recognize that they have their own psychopomp allies? How do you help to serve as an intermediary between someone who's dying and the spirit world? And what does that look like depending on the state of being that the person who's dying is in? How much vitality do they have? How cognizant are they? How conscious are they? Are they themselves able to enter into a trance state and enter into a journey where they can work directly with their own helping spirits? Or will they need to have someone like you journey for them? And will they need to be more receptive or passive because they're not well enough? They don't have the vitality. They can't perhaps hold their focus or concentration as long, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be looking at different ways of working in order to accommodate the many, 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 perhaps innumerable situations that we encounter when it comes to caring for the dying, again, because each death is utterly unique. And yet, what are the commonalities that we can prepare for and anticipate and support? And what tools and skills do you need in order to be able to do that? And so that's what the curriculum is going to consist of, providing you with the tools and, of course, with the opportunity to practice with one another in order to then be able to bring these practices and teachings to someone in the dying process, the goal being to help them connect with their own spiritual support, to help facilitate that process for them so that they have their own direct connection, again, to the extent that that's possible, their own direct connection with that spiritual support. Again, remembering it is the conveyors or conductors of souls, it is the psychopomp allies who conduct the soul out of this world at the time of death. So having a sense of familiarity with who we are and what this is going to look like is so critical when it comes to someone feeling prepared and experiencing that support as beneficial, experiencing that support as expected. It doesn't come out of the blue. It's not unanticipated or misunderstood, but it's rather clear exactly who those helping spirits are, why they're there, and what they're doing. And so I'll just end by offering, if I may, because I'm sure you have questions, and I'm hopeful that what I'm sharing is giving you enough of an overview to orient you and then to enable you to ask any further clarifying questions that you may have. But I'll just end with a reminder when it comes to the functions that the psychopomp allies play. One is that they are the harbingers of death. And so they can be the messengers that come indicating to someone that death is nearing. And of course, that could be in an instance where someone knows perfectly well that they're in the dying process, but it can also happen when someone is perfectly well. And they can receive from the psychopomp allies a visitation, a message, etc., indicating that death is near. And with that being one of the functions that our psychopomp allies play, it's important for us to learn about how to relate to that skillfully on our own behalf and on behalf of others, because sometimes the message isn't for or about us. Sometimes it's actually for someone else in our lives. So that's a part of what we'll be exploring. The psychopomp allies also assist in helping us prepare for this decoupling that occurs between the physical body and the soul. They help us prepare to let go of our physical bodies, which of course facilitates the soul's passage onwards, if you will, the soul's continued journey and the soul's departure from the human realm. And so that's an aspect of what the psychopomp allies provide. They can keep vigil. Their presence can be very palpable in the room, in a space where death is occurring or has just occurred. And they bring a different register. They have a different vibrational frequency that can also help us turn our attention away from the human world, because their vibrational frequency is not the same as the vibrational frequency of the human world. And so when we become attuned to their vibrational frequency, that can help us with our transition. So that's another function that they serve. As guides, as soul guides, or again, conductors or conveyors of the soul, they know the pathways. They know the pathways that lead out of this world. They assist in ensuring that souls cross the threshold into the light by way of whatever pathway they have chosen. And in my experience, now, of course, we don't get to go all the way. We only get to go part of the way, which is something else we'll talk about during the retreat. In my experience, there isn't by any means one pathway. And interestingly, we as human psychopomps partnering with the spirits who are psychopomps, helping ensure that their support is being felt and received by those who are dying, we don't need to know which pathway will be used. I would say that isn't even ours to know. So part of what we're exploring is what is within our purview, what can we know, and what do we actually not need to know? What can we entrust to the care and wisdom and expertise of our psychopomp ally helping spirits? Because this is their area of mastery. And we know that even though death is a certainty, that doesn't mean that we have a complete understanding of it by any means. So how do we bow to the mystery of death while also preparing for it to the greatest extent possible? And so we know the psychopomp allies guide souls according to the pathway that is correct for them. And that in so doing, they are conducted out of this world across a threshold and into the light. The last thing I'll offer, if I may, about the Psychopomp allies is that they never turn anybody away. And so I would say my orientation as a teacher and what I hope we can share together is a shared view when it comes to the light welcoming all. We are all of the light. Many of us feel that we all originate in the light or as light and will all return to the light. And I think that view can be held alongside any religious or spiritual context. In other words, I'm not seeking to provide you with a cosmology that will serve as a substitute for what you already know and what you already believe, but rather to provide a framework that I hope is complementary and enhances what you already know and already believe by working with this universal principle that the helping spirits welcome everyone into the light. And that this is therefore a set of tools and practices that can be used literally to support anybody, no matter who they were and what they did or did not do, whether they caused harm to themselves and or others. What we're working with is the spiritual dimension of their death and the premise that everybody deserves to die with dignity and grace and to die knowing that they will be received with love and, if needed, forgiveness, that they will be received by benevolent beings who will warmly embrace them, that nobody will be turned away. And so I think, if I may, I'll just check in with my helping spirits and see if they have anything more they'd like me to add. And then I'll see what questions or reflections you may have. So just a moment. The helping spirits would like me to add one thing, and I'm sensitive to ensuring that you know that this is not intended to in any way create fearfulness, and yet it is quite a potent message, and so I'll share it with you. And then, of course, if anyone has any further questions, not only about what I've shared thus far, but also about what I'm about to share, please tell me. What the helping spirits are saying is that there is a reason that you're each here tonight. And obviously, this is a topic of interest, and for many, if not all of you, a calling. And what the helping spirits are saying is that this is a choice point, and that your ways of relating to death, your own and others, is what you're considering. Do you feel that you have adequate support, adequate training? Do you feel that you're adequately prepared? Do you feel that if someone close to you, a loved one, needed you, that you could be there for them in the ways that would be commensurate with the depth of your love and care for them? And what the helping spirits are saying is that if you're even here, even being a part of this conversation, you have already received signs and indicators that it's time for you to become, let's just say, more well educated, more well versed, more comfortable with death. And the question is how to do that and what would best support you in that. And is it this retreat, something else, a variety of things, a combination of things? But what they're saying that I think is very interesting is don't delay. Pay attention. If you are receiving signs and omens and indicators that now is the time, then now is the time. And that isn't in any way to suggest that your life is at risk or anyone dear to you is facing a risk to their life. It's rather to say that we don't know how we'll be called to serve and who's going to need us. But the fact that you're even here tells us that someone is going to need you. It might be your best friend's cat. It might be your coworker's grandmother. Someone is going to need you to understand more about the spiritual dimension of the dying process and to provide comfort to them because of that knowledge, because of that understanding that you have, that you can share. And the question is, are these the tools and the techniques and the practices, and is this the context that will best serve you in learning what you need to in order to show up for whoever is going to need you? But the helping spirits are saying, someone is going to need you. Maybe they already do. Maybe you already know who they are. And what a privilege it is to support anyone's dying process, a stranger, a loved one. What an immense, immense privilege. So, how can we be equal to that? How can we bring our wholeheartedness, our whole presence, but also all that we can in the way of our knowledge, our skills, our relationships to the spirit world? And so there's a deepening that you're being invited into. And whether it's this or something else, and although I don't know all of you well, you probably all know me well enough to know that it doesn't need to be this. Find your medicine. Find the medicine you need to become more well educated, again, more well versed, more facile, more comfortable, more knowledgeable in the area where you'll be called to serve. But pay attention. The helping spirits are saying, pay attention. Someone either needs you already or is going to need you. And again, what a privilege. How do we prepare to be able to serve in that way, which is a gift to us? It's a gift to us. So I'll pause there, my dears, and see if you have questions or reflections. If so, my screen is not big enough to see all of your faces at once, and so it really helps me if you can just raise your digital hands. And if you're not sure how to do that, you can just sing out to me. That works too, the old-fashioned way. Catherine, your question. Thank you for raising your hand.
Hello, everybody. Do most people who take a training to be a psychopomp and have some experience learn about their own psychopomps?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think part of what you bring in supporting others in the dying process is you bring the embodied experience of having your own psychopomp allies, how comforting that is for you, and how interesting that's been. Gosh, when did these relationships first start? And what aspects of your spiritual evolutionary unfolding do these relationships represent? Are they from other lifetimes? Are they from your family of origin? Are they from other lineages that you belong to, or some combination thereof? And so, as psychopumps, what I feel is that part of what we bring is this modeling that we do. We have our own embodied experience of partnering with psychopomp allies who are there to serve us and possibly support us in serving others as well. But yes, you will definitely be starting with who yours are. Now, we may not even get to know who all of them are, but at least we'll get to know who some of them are, because some people have a very great many. And so we'll at least get to know who some of them are. And that's, of course, so beneficial for you yourself in preparing for your own death. But then again, it also becomes what you're sharing with others is what that relationship has given you and how that creates such a sense of comfort in knowing that no matter where you die, when you die, how you die, no matter if no one is near you or you're surrounded by loved ones, your psychopomp allies will be there. And you can know that with utter, indomitable conviction. And my hope would be at the end of the retreat, maybe you already feel this way. At the end of the retreat, you will all know that with unshakable conviction, and to be able to then offer that conviction to others, to pass it on to others, to help others cultivate that. Therein lies, for me, a very important aspect of the role of the human psychopomp, because what we're doing is embodying and transmitting the relationships we have with our own psychopomp allies. Does that make
Thanks.
sense, Catherine?
Thank you. Yes.
You're more than welcome. Thank you so much for the question. Christina. Oh, I saw you, but now I've lost you.
Okay,
There
now you
you
can
are.
hear me because I was muted. Sorry. So I did a full apprenticeship in shamanistic practices with a teacher in my area, and part of that was to use psychopomp for people who have already died and are in this middle world and stuck. And I love that practice. Um, Is that going to be at all part of your retreat?
Such a wonderful question, Christina. Thank you. If I may, I'll just take a step back and explain what you mean in case others are learning about this possibility for the first time. So, psychopomps support the living, the dying, and the dead. And by that I mean human psychopomps as well as helping spirits who specialize in psychopomps. And of course, this is the partnership that we're cultivating as psychopomps, is the partnership between the human and spirit psychopomps. And when we serve the dead, what Christina is referring to is that sometimes people don't cross over successfully at the time of death, and they linger here in the human realm for any number of reasons. They might have died very abruptly and don't even realize that they're dead. They may be riddled with grief, unresolved issues, unfinished business, their attachments to their lives, their possessions, their status, their families can preclude them from crossing over successfully. Our attachments to them can preclude them from crossing over successfully. So, what Christine is referring to is what happens when what I've described, I aspire for. to offer everyone who's dying, for everyone to have who's dying, which is a successful radiant passage, what happens when that doesn't happen? And often it doesn't because of, again, unresolved issues, anxieties, including concerns of a spiritual nature. Interestingly, that's a very common reason that people don't cross over at the time of death, is because they fear punishment and judgment. They fear that they will be sent to hell, and don't feel that anyone will receive them lovingly, that they will be welcomed, that they will be forgiven. If there's anything that they need to be forgiven for, I would contend we all have things we need to be forgiven for. But the question is, as a psychopomp, are you called to serve the living, the dying, and or the dead? And I would say, Christina, we will touch upon how to support those who have already died and who are still here. And that could be someone who passed away 2 years ago and whose soul still lingers. It could be someone who passed away 2 decades or 2 centuries ago and whose soul still lingers. However, that won't be the main focus. The main focus will be supporting the living and the dying. So preparing for death in order to help facilitate a radiant passage, which is very intentionally to avoid the situation that you're describing, which is sadly so commonplace, but this is the preventative measure that's needed, is for more people to be prepared and to thus have more successful, complete passages. Does that make sense, Christina?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you're unmuted, but I couldn't hear what you said. That was odd. Oh, I still didn't hear, but I saw you say thank you. I think you said that did make sense. Thank you. Okay. And if I may, Christina, I'll just check in with the helping spirits and see if they'd like me to add anything. Just a moment. I will add, and this might sound a little odd for those of you who aren't used to me as a teacher and my approach to teaching, so bear with me, and I welcome any questions you may have. But the way that I work with the helping spirits is very organic because there isn't one way to engage in a retreat. There isn't one curriculum to follow with one sequence, with one series of journeys. We could approach this work in literally an endless number of ways. So there is always a degree to which I don't actually know what's going to happen until it starts to happen. And I always joke that I'm on a need to know basis with my helping spirits, and that every cohort elicits through and from me what they need from the helping spirits in the order that they need it. And so I can say that based on what I know, Christina, there will be a light touch when it comes to those who have already died. And if that's what the cohort tells me they need, once we're together at Hollyhock, and that more of an emphasis on that is actually what will serve you, then I will adapt accordingly. And so there is an extent to which, because of the way that I teach, it's not premeditated. And I'm sure you can even tell that just from listening to me talk tonight, that it's very much alive and dynamic. I'm working in partnership with the helping spirits moment by moment and seeing what's needed, what emphasis would best support those of you who join me at Hollyhock, what would best serve you in your unfolding as psychopomps. And so, yes, we have a program description that I provided Hollyhock with, but do hold that with a grain of salt because there just is always that organic element that once we're there and we see what's needed, then we'll do what's needed. Does that make sense,
Yes.
Christina? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Gail, your question.
Hello, Julie. Thank you for this morning. It's really lovely and a great overview. But I'm thinking, what's coming up for me is what happens when it's not a lovely process. That I know that the spirits will not turn anyone away, but I'm wondering about when the person who's died will turn them away. Two deaths last year, son-in-law, so angry and so angry and deep denial. And really, I couldn't do anything but listen and accept him. He came after he died and was very noisy and did some damage outside. Like I couldn't really get near him. I just supported his daughter, his wife, his partner. And the other one's my mother, and she's the feistiest old thing. She was 100 and she was really difficult. And she never once approved of me or my partner for 32 years. And she saw my inclination towards a spiritual path. And it was a lot of mumbo jumbo to her. And if any psychopomp came near her, I don't know that she'd be particularly welcoming. Now that's not an exaggeration. That's sort of how she is. So the two, I mean, I had one death that was beautiful and there was love and presence and everything. That was in hospice. But these two live ones don't seem to fit into what you've been saying so much.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Thank you, Gail, for bringing those examples forward. With your permission, may I check in with the helping spirits and see how they'd
Yes.
like me to answer? Thank you. If I may, Gail, because I want to be so very mindful and respectful of those loved ones of yours and to not comment upon their situation specifically, but to rather take a step back and consider cosmological differences and denial. So, just as topics. Are you comfortable with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So, let's start with the cosmological question. I think one of the most important aspects of developing sensitivity as a psychopomp is to bear in mind that we're never seeking to impose a cosmology on anyone, but rather to work from within their cosmology. And so the question always becomes then, who, if anyone, would they be receptive to receiving support from? Who, if anyone, would they be amenable to receiving support from? And this is where as psychopomps, yes, we may have our usual psychopomp allies that we work with, those that are familiar, that we've developed relationships with over time. But part of our work is to call upon the help of psychopomp allies that may be totally unknown to us, who are the right allies for a given person, and to not assume that our allies will be universally embraced. And so we work both within and outside of our known psychopomp allies. And this is where some psychopomps engage in quite an in-depth study of the psychopomp helping spirits that have been identified cross-culturally, both historically and in contemporary times, as serving in this function in order to be able to call upon a specific psychopomp spirit by name, given who their client, patient, neighbor, friend, or loved one is, who's in need of support. I don't personally feel that's critically important. I think it's a beautiful way of deepening, but I don't think it's an absolute necessity, because my experience has taught me that we can call out to the psychopomp allies for the one who will be able to serve in a given situation, and thus have the privilege of meeting perhaps a new psychopomp ally who isn't there for us per se, but rather for the person. And so we try to work from within someone's cosmology, which might include a completely scientific, completely secular cosmology. So that will be part of what we talk about during the retreat. And then, of course, yes, we'll also touch upon how to respond and relate to extreme states of fear and anxiety and denial. And of course, with denial being so common in the West, especially, again, as I've been saying, how we don't treat death as a certainty, but rather as a possibility. Maybe it won't happen to me after all. I mean, it's so interesting that anyone can maintain that posture for very long, but we do. And so we'll definitely be touching upon that as well, how to offer support in those instances, and when our support may not be needed or wanted, how to gracefully respond to that also.
That sounds brilliant, Julie. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Judy. Oh, Judy, you're muted. I'm so sorry to interject.
No, that's appropriate to interject. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I'm in Australia, and I'm not going to be able to attend. In any event, I've only had one or two contacts with you through things that have been presented on Sounds True, like the conversations with Tammy and so on. So I don't have any, let's see, I work as a spiritual care practitioner, teacher, and supervisor of people who do spiritual care work. But I don't have any, I don't know, education, if you like, or training in the things that you're describing. So my two questions are, is there something more I would need to do to take on this kind of training? And secondly, is there anywhere near a home for me that it's possible?
I happen to have a brilliant student in Australia, where, I mean, Australia is a large place. That said,
Yeah.
where in Australia are you?
I'm about 4 hours drive north of Sydney, but if you tell me where they are, I can probably identify it.
Yes. Well, she was actually in transition when we were last in touch. So how about, if I may, Judy, I will reach out to her and
Yes.
see where she landed and if she would be open to being connected with you.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I'd really like that. Would be wonderful. Thank you. And how will you know how to put us together? You've got my contact information from my registration. Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if I may, I will say we're just about to take a summer break. And so I will make sure to do that, Judy, when I'm back from my summer break at the start of August.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you, Julie.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And the person in Australia she's a brilliant practitioner. I trained her to be a practitioner, but she has also received training from my teacher, Sandra Ingerman. She went through a teacher training with Sandra Ingerman. So she's trained to
Okay.
teach psychopomp. So that might be an interesting possible collaboration.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Judy, for the questions. Marnie.
Hi, this has been very lovely. I'm glad I was able to attend tonight. My question is whether the training or just if you have any words to share about when somebody who's passing has something like Lewy body dementia or Alzheimer's, or they're heavily medicated and their consciousness is altered. Does the work of being a psychopomp need to have specialized approaches in those cases, or maybe just leaving that wide open? Hmm.
Yes, certainly, Marnie. Thank you for your question. That will be one of the topics that we touch upon during the retreat, because, of course, there will be instances where there is someone in the dying process who has given you permission to support them, but may no longer be able to engage with you directly. And so the question then becomes twofold. You can journey on their behalf, which is one means of continuing to provide them with support, even if they're not able to participate in any way. You can also journey to them and use the journey as a means for communicating with them directly. And that will be a part of what we learn during the retreat. And you would be working with, this is in and of itself a teaching, so I don't want to digress for too long, but what I'll be sharing with you are teachings about what's called the true self. And the true self is the blueprint for our perfection in this lifetime. And you can journey to the true self of another person with their permission, of course, and thus dialogue with them and help them connect with their psychopomp allies within the context of or inside the crucible of a journey. And so it's using that practice in order to then be able to contact and interact with people who are no longer capable of verbal communication. Does that make sense, Marnie? I don't know how familiar you are with
Yeah,
journeying, so
quite. But my question then now becomes, if you don't get that permission because they're already in that state, are you then serving as a psychopomp to really just support the loved ones gathered and the energies that are probably present around that transition for that person? Because or you would journey to the true self of the person who's pretty incapacitated at that point.
yes. I think each situation is unique, and part of
Okay.
what we'll discuss during the retreat will be this question itself, the ethics and permissions, and what those different scenarios look like. I think I would say it depends on the purview of your scope of practice in the capacity in which you're serving, and
Okay.
whether or not that includes what we're discussing, and if not, then could that become included? And if that happens at the time when, or long past the time when, the patient is able to offer their verbal approval, then what measures are there in place when it comes to any type of intervention, whether it's medical or spiritual? So is it then their medical power of attorney or the person who's legally responsible for their care who's providing permission? So that would be a starting point. But in our work, we also always ask for permission from the helping spirits and the true self of the person, in addition to the legal representative. So it's permission on all three levels. And if there's a no on any level, then it's a no. But we'll talk about those different types of scenarios and sort of the sequencing in those different contexts. But does that give you enough information for now? Does that make sense for
Yes.
now?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Chris, your question.
Thank you for taking. I had two questions. One is, would you ever offer this course online, like you're doing this shamanic journey?
The answer is yes, in theory. And
Okay.
in keeping with what I said about how I'm on a need to know basis with my helping spirits, I wouldn't need that to be a directive that came from my helping spirits, but I would be very open to doing that. And so if that were something that the helping spirits guided me to do, I would be very open to doing that. I think that, although, of course, being in a gorgeous place like Hollyhock offers so much in terms of being together in person and being in nature and so forth, I appreciate that that isn't realistic for everyone, and that learning virtually is very effective and a way that I love to teach and learn. And so I would be very open to it. I have not received that directive from my helping spirits, but if I do, I'll let you know.
The other question I had is, since you talked about people being stuck in between,
Yeah.
what I'm curious, what indication would give you that somebody's stuck? How would you know?
Mm.
I mean, what
Mhm.
would indicate that?
Yes, well, there aren't always overt indicators. There can be subtle indicators, and sometimes there aren't any, or at least not any that are easily or overtly perceptible. I'm going to ask Chris, my helping spirits, which of the indicators they would like me to emphasize in answering your question in terms of those that are a little bit more overt. So just a moment, if I may. Oh, there you are. I just wanted to make sure I could see your face, Chris. So, what the helping spirits are saying is that there can be a number of indicators, and the way they're inviting me to answer the question has to do with perhaps helping you and others understand your gifts as psychopomps and what I would describe as your medicine as psychopomps. Because one of the gifts of the psychopomp is becoming aware when someone has died and not crossed over successfully, beginning to hear their voice, beginning to sense their presence, possibly seeing them and dreaming, and or I would say dreaming about them, perhaps seeing them in the space where they died or in a place that they loved. And of course, sometimes that can happen even when someone is dying or has just died and they're preparing to cross over beautifully, but they're saying goodbye. And so they can visit places of significance before leaving this realm. The ability to draw that distinction is part of the training that one receives as a psychopomp in order to be able to discern, is someone here because they're preparing to cross over, or are they here because they didn't cross over successfully? And sometimes what can be perceived is, if you will, a snapshot of the state they were in at the time of death. And so let's say someone was in an acute state of fearfulness or an acute state of anxiety. And that feeling tone, if you will, can be sensed and is often perceived by psychopomps and can be indicative of the fact that they haven't crossed over successfully because that state has not changed, because it is being sustained. Whereas in a natural and successful crossing over process, there would be a shift in that state. And so one thing I think that feels important to clarify is that even when the circumstances surrounding someone's passing are adverse for whatever reasons, they can still have a beautiful passage spiritually. And I would say the converse can also be true. Even when the conditions seem supportive and are not adverse, someone could still struggle to cross over successfully. So part of what we need to try to avoid are coming to conclusions based on causality when each situation is so entirely unique and when we're dealing with a process that's occurring on multiple levels at one time. But Chris, I think what I would offer is that it is an aspect of the medicine of the psychopomp to become aware of what we call suffering beings, to become aware of departed souls who have in fact experienced a physical death but who haven't crossed over successfully. So that's actually a common hallmark of a psychopomp, is that they're the ones who sense when there is unrest surrounding someone's death, or they're the ones that go to an historic hotel and feel the presence of what we would colloquially refer to as a ghost in the room or in the hallway or whatever else. These are simply, very simply, people who have died and not crossed over successfully, whose souls still linger, who either don't know they're dead or don't know how to carry on. In some cases, much like what Gail was saying, sometimes people turn away from the psychopomp allies who are there to tend to them and to care for them out of rejection, out of fear, out of denial, et cetera, et cetera. So there are so many reasons why at the time of death, someone may not cross over successfully. And then, yes, their presence can be perceived afterwards. And then the work of the psychopomp is then what falls into the category of the psychopomp supporting the dead, as Christina was asking about. It's then helping them complete that passage, helping them go to the light successfully at that time, even if they died 5 years ago or 5,000 years ago. So I realize, Chris, I'm saying a lot of things at once. Is any of that helpful? Does that bring up any more questions for you?
No, that's really helpful. Sounds like Poltergeist. I remember that movie when they were trying to help somebody go into the light. But I mean, I'm just fascinated by the things that you're saying about. I didn't realize somebody could get stuck trying to get to the other side.
Yes, yes, they can get stuck, they can get lost, they can get confused, they can be recalcitrant. Any number of things can happen. And so, again, herein lies my inspiration to teach this work, and especially to do so outside of the context of my long term trainings, because this is a discrete topic that is so broadly applicable and that all of us need to become more well versed in. And it is intended to be preventative, it is intended to prevent troublesome crossings, if you will, but to state that in positive terms, it's to help facilitate radiant passages for everyone. Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
To
Rebecca.
oh,
Sally, I see you're.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. You'll be next. Oh, after Lucinda. Pardon me. You're third in line, Sally. Rebecca.
Oh,
Hi.
Hi. I am just wondering if you could speak briefly. I'm just trying to wrap my head around something that's maybe not head wrap aroundable, but I'm just wondering about the engagement between like the persons that's offering or sharing, or just on the other side of the person that is maybe passing on, the interaction between our own psychopomp allies and the other persons. And if in this workshop there's a focus on, I'm imagining it's more of like getting to know our own so that we can stronger ally with them in order to bring them forth, invite them to be guides or supports. But I'm just wondering about that interaction, if you might be able to speak to it briefly.
Certainly. If I may, Rebecca, I'll ask my helping spirits how they'd like me to respond. The way the helping spirits are inviting me to respond is to speak about another aspect of the conviction that I hold as a psychopomp, which you'll hear me talk about during the retreat. Conviction being a guiding principle in this work for me. And what they're showing me is the importance of us cultivating from our own experience, because I could say this to you until the cows come home, but ultimately, what I'm interested in is helping to create the conditions that will allow you to discover this for yourselves and that will allow you to cultivate your own conviction, which is that there is a psychopomp ally for everyone, that there is no one who does not have a psychopomp ally or more than one psychopomp ally. However, that doesn't mean that as a practicing psychopomp, let's say my form of service is actively at the bedside of those in the dying process, that doesn't mean that it's my responsibility or even within my purview to know in every instance who that will be. But it is within my purview to ask my trusted psychopomp allies, those I have cultivated relationships with, to call upon whomever is needed for the patient or client. And so I think that's the interaction, Rebecca, that you're wondering about, is how to create that bridge for the client or patient. And sometimes it does come from our own psychopomp allies who bring the ally that is needed in a given situation, who may be totally unknown to you as the human psychopomp. And so this is where the element of the mystery is prevalent in our work. And we don't have to be constrained by the limits of our knowledge. That's one of the beautiful ways that the helping spirits work with us, is that they work beyond what we know. And when we partner with them in that spirit, of course, that then furthers our knowing, it furthers our understanding, which is a part of why working in this way is such an immense privilege. It's so initiatory and instructive for us. But I'm wondering, Rebecca, does that land for you, or does that bring forth a further inquiry?
It definitely does bring up further inquiries and curiosities, but I think I will sit with that and just try to understand and also not understand and just let it sort of be. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Lucinda, and then Sally Jane.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Uh, um, it's been one of my life's dream to go to Hollyhock, and I signed up for a workshop, and then I saw your workshop, and I'm already signed up. And so there's another question in the chat. Somebody else, along with me, wanting to know is any chance that this workshop will be offered next year, or is that getting way ahead of ourselves?
Oh, I appreciate you naming that. Sorry, I don't have the ability to look at the chat while teaching. So thank you, Lucinda, for bringing that forward. And if I may, I'm thrilled that you're fulfilling your dream of going to Hollyhock, although I'm sad it won't be as a part of this retreat. I'm delighted for you that you're going anyway. And the answer to the question is, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know. I would love to return to Hollyhock year after year and continue offering whatever I'm guided to and whatever Hollyhock is receptive to. And at the moment, I don't have any plans for 2027. Those conversations just haven't happened yet. And so the answer is quite honestly, I don't know. I simply don't know.
Okay. Do your helping spirits know?
They probably, but they haven't told me. And they
Thank
also
you.
haven't told Hollyhock.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucinda. I hope you have a wonderful time. And whoever else is going to Hollyhock this summer, I hope you have a wonderful time. And hopefully our paths will cross there another time.
Thank you.
Sally Jane.
Hello, Julie. Lovely to be with you.
Likewise.
Yeah. My question is pretty straightforward. How does everything you've shared here, both in your sharing and the questions, how does that apply to non-human intelligence, like animals, trees, nature spirits? How does that tie in with honoring that in this way?
Yes, yes.
And
So I
are
would,
there differences? Are there differences?
hmm, I would say in my experience, the similarities are that they all have psychopomp allies. They all have their pathways. They are all received in the light as well. And although the focus of the retreat at Hollyhock will be on supporting human patients and clients and loved ones and so forth, I'm sure there will be conversations about exactly what you're wondering about because some people are called to serve as psychopomps on behalf of animals, on behalf of the natural world. I've been a part of many beautiful psychopomp rituals involving the spirits of trees where deforestation has occurred. And so, yes, the work can be applied in a variety of contexts. And so, I certainly don't mean to emphasize humans insofar as my taking an overly human centric perspective, because goodness knows I certainly aspire to take less of a human centric perspective the more I come to know the magnificent other than human beings that exist, the more I seek to lessen my human centric approach. And and I am taking that in this context because that is the focus of the retreat is providing psychopomp for people. But I'm so appreciative of your question. And yes, let us hold these practices and teachings as being applicable and available to all beings.
Thank you, Julie. That really touches me.
Mhm. You're welcome.
Would you ever teach anything from that perspective?
Hmm.
Would you ever do a teaching for them where we as humans can truly be custodians of them all and help them in
Mhm.
all these ways?
Mhm. Mhm. Once again, I would be very open to that if I were deemed fit to do so by the helping spirits, and that would need to be something that I
Yeah,
was guided to do by them.
right.
Hmm.
I understand.
Yeah. Hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm. Well, my dears, I know we're reaching the end of our time together. Is there anyone who's been a little shy about speaking up who may like to do so now with our remaining time? Yes, Deborah. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, for this evening. It has been very, very informative and very supportive. I wasn't planning on speaking, however, something inside is calling me forth. Based on, a number of things that you've shared. And just to preface this, I work. I'm Canadian, but I work with a U.S. organization that deals with the nature of consciousness and near-death studies
Hmm.
and life after death and such. And so that's what I'm in alignment with and have been for pretty much all my life. That there is more, than this physical, it doesn't, life does not end when this physical vehicle passes. Maybe perhaps that's when life begins. I don't know. But my view on all of that shifted. I haven't. It's just shifted, and I think I do believe it's temporary. It's temporary. Just a year ago, my 96-year-old mom passed. It was expected and prepared for, and it was very, very beautiful in her passing. And I've had communications with her since and such, but tragically, just under a month following her death, an estranged brother came back into my and my other brothers' lives. And he clearly was not well. And I'll be mindful of how I say this because, I don't want to upset anyone else. My dear brothers, who I was very, very close to, his life was brutally taken by our somewhat estranged brother who had re-entered our life after our mother's passing. And then within a 24-hour period, he took his own life. I won't go into the details of either situation because it's triggering enough for me, let alone anyone else who might be here and hear it. So that just leads me to, I do get the sense that that brother, I'll just call him the perpetrator, is in,
I can't hear you.
limbo, or I don't know what to call it, but in that in-between space. And I don't feel I'm in a place that I want to interfere or be involved in that. I do communicate with my other dear brother whose life was taken, and it's just he's beautiful, he's radiant, and with my mom. And so I guess really, if you have any insight on that at all, I'd very much welcome hearing from you.
Deborah, may I check in with the helping spirits?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Deborah, I'm so appreciative of your willingness to be vulnerable with us about the tragic loss that you experienced and the complexity surrounding the loss of your dear brother. And I'm mindful of wanting to respond and share the guidance with you that I receive from the helping spirits in a way that is respectful of everyone's boundaries, everyone involved, and thus focusing on what may be beneficial for you. And what the helping spirits are offering is that we are initiated onto the path of the psychopomp by a variety of means, and that your lifelong dedication in your professional life to supporting people and learning about people who have had near-death experiences and who have touched and tasted and experienced the mystery of what lies beyond, that in and of itself is an expression of the signature of the psychopomp. That's an expression of you being someone who carries the mantle of the psychopomp. And that we can also come to know that about ourselves, that we carry the signature or the mantle of the psychopomp by way of initiations, and that these initiations can sometimes happen through tragic means. And yet, could there possibly, in the midst of the severity of your loss, could there be a sacred perspective that may be beneficial, that may help you hold what has unfolded? And if that's something that you would be open to, that could be explored with the support of a skilled practitioner who would have the experience and maturity and depth of practice to be able to enter into that process of inquiry with you. Because we know that initiation can sometimes come through beautiful means and gentle means, and can sometimes come through terribly difficult means. And yet there is potentially a sacred dimension to our initiations, regardless of the means by which they come. And might it be a comfort to perhaps learn about that with the support of a skilled practitioner? And so the helping spirits are simply offering that, should that ever be something that you would like to consider, that you are welcome to reach out to me anytime, and I would be more than happy to provide a referral. And of course, I would be very, very thoughtful about who that is. I would ask the helping spirits. It wouldn't just be just a general referral, but I would check in with the helping spirits for you and ask for you specifically.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for listening and your perspective and offering that up to me. Much appreciated. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I'd like to check in with helping spirits one last time. I know we've reached the end of our time together. I'd just like to see if there's anything they'd like us to close our evening with. Just a moment. If I may, for those who still have a moment to remain, I'd just like to end with an expression of gratitude on our shared behalf, that I welcome you in joining me in. We gratefully acknowledge our combined helping spirits, those known and unknown to us, as well as the benevolent forces that support us. We offer our thanks for all of the support that we have already received, and we offer our thanks in advance for all of the support that we have yet to receive. We ask that our activities from this day and for all the days to come, individually and collectively, be for the benefit of all beings. And given the purpose of our gathering this evening, in the service of all beings experiencing radiant passages spiritually, even though we humbly acknowledge the many difficult conditions that can be present at the time of death. May we nonetheless serve to facilitate radiant passages for all. Thank you, everyone. I know I'll get to see some of you at Hollyhock. Probably not everyone, although I wish that could be. But I'm so grateful to have shared this time with you this evening. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
You're
Thank you so much,
welcome.
Julie.
Thank
So
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Love, love.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, indeed. Have a lovely day, Judy, as we prepare for bed.
Yeah. And thank you for making it a time where I didn't have to get up at 1 a.m.
You are so welcome. Good night. Bye-bye, everyone.